Okay, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Land Stewardship Subcommittee. It's Wednesday, May 8th at 8:32. And the first thing we need to do is to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, anyone have any changes to the meeting agenda? All right, then we'll take a vote. Do we have anyone online?
No.
Right? Okay. So we can just do hands then. All in favor of approving the agenda? Okay. Unanimous? The next thing would be April meeting minutes. I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, does anyone have any comment about the April meeting agenda? Any changes?
You mean the minutes?
Minutes, I'm sorry. Yes, no, agenda, that would be funny. Yes.
I do have a couple, and I'm not sure who I should talk to. I saw, I read these quite a while ago and saw a couple of minor issues.
Okay, well, if
Is
it's,
this something that someone I should tell those to?
Marty is our secretary.
Marty, okay. Well, under number 7, the third paragraph, Jeremy Howland will be performing lichen survey.
Yes.
It just said will performing, at least on these. I don't know if they were changed later, but. And in the 5th paragraph, members of ATO will be working at the Pike property on Friday, April 19th between something to remove old fencing. I assume there were hours in there.
We just removed between. Okay.
Yeah. And under reports and committees, Agricultural Commission, it said, John stated that the AC is forming 2 new citizen committees. I think they're calling them focus groups. I don't know that it matters, but.
Yeah, involving citizens, but focus groups, yeah.
What is that? What should it read?
Focus groups.
Not committees?
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
It should be citizen focus groups?
yeah, I think that's.
That's what they're calling them, so
Yeah.
I figured just to be consistent. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay, so with the changes as noted, can I have a vote to approve the April meeting minutes? All in favor? Okay, unanimous? So then we'll move along to the Wagon Hill update with Rich.
Okay. Let me just share my screen here if I can. See how that works. All right.
Good morning.
Guess that's okay. All right, so just to refresh everybody's memory, this valve replacement project at Wagon Hill Farm is a 2-phase project. Is everybody familiar with the project themselves? Have they heard about this project? I think most people, I've presented this a couple times. This is the work area. You can see there's one area at Wagon Hill Farm, and then there's another area at Fox Point in Newington. So they're replacing valves. It's part of a 2-phase project where they're actually going to be replacing the pipe that runs under Little Bay at some point in the future on a second phase, and we've been working with
I
them.
don't think you said Portsmouth, just for people who might
Right,
listen to this later.
sure,
talk
sure.
about the Portsmouth.
Right, so this is the Portsmouth water line. It's the city of Portsmouth who owns this infrastructure, and in fact, it supplies up to 60% of the water demand for the city of Portsmouth and regional communities that work with Portsmouth on water supply. And this comes from the Madbury treatment plant, and it's conveyed through this system of piping. The pipes were in deteriorating condition. The valves were not operational, and they were obsolete. And when they originally bid this project, it was the full replacement of the piping that went under Little Bay, as well as the valves, but they had some significantly high bids, so they decided to look at this in two phases. So the first phase is the replacement of these valves with insertion valves, and the second phase will happen at some point in the future, we're told, and that is the replacement of the pipe that crosses Little Bay. So we've worked very closely when this was first discussed several years ago with Portsmouth to develop an access kind of plan. You can see on the screen this line right here is the water line, and they have a deeded easement for that water line that comes through the community gardens, underneath the community gardens, and really impacts a large area of probably the most sensitive areas of Wagon Hill Farm, or at least a very high intensively used area of Wagon Hill Farm. So we developed a separate access plan, and really at the suggestion of Councilor Burton, to look at the access being as far away from the formal access where there's most use, and push this to the far eastern portion of the property. So you can see this area is now used as an access way to their work area down here. To their work area down here where the insertion valve project is taking place. The access also included a requirement for the use of these timber cribs. So we have timber cribbing. You may have gone up there. If anybody has seen that, there's a significant amount of timber cribbing that pretty much takes the entire access way and protects the ground with this installation of these wooden planks that then the heavy equipment, the trucks, any type of deliveries are all kind of maintained on this area, and they don't go off into other areas that might cause damage to the property. The area also includes a laydown area, and that laydown area is up near Route 4. So when they have deliveries of materials, pipe, any type of gravel, sands, inert materials, all of that material is staged in the laydown area, and then it is ferried down to the work area as it's needed. This is just a photo right here of some test pitting that was done. This is the existing vault where the valves are, and then you see this is a new valve being placed, one of these insertion valves being placed as part of the project. So I've been attending the construction meetings, for this project. In fact, there's one today at 9 o'clock, but I'll miss that one today because I wanted to come here and update the Land Stewardship Committee. And I'd say overall, the contractor and Portsmouth have been performing exceptionally well. They've been very responsive to any requests that we have, and they've been very proactive in ensuring that any damage that was caused or any type of questions that are raised are addressed right away. So we've been very happy with SUR, who is the contractor, as well as the City of Portsmouth on the project. And then, so right now the insertion valves have all been installed on both sides, the Newington side and the Durham side. They've been backfilled, and we're now waiting for a 20-inch valve, which will be a tap on the existing line that will serve as the connection point for the new line that would cross Little Bay at some point in the near future. And we're waiting for the delivery, or they're waiting for the delivery of that valve, and they're hoping that is going to occur very soon, the delivery, and then they'll be doing the tap during the week of May 13th to 17th. And then at that same time, one of the goals that we had as part of this project is to provide both potable water and fire protection to the Bickford Chesley House as part of the rehabilitation and restoration that we have underway. And they agreed to that as part of our negotiations with them. And that will be a tap off that transmission main as well. And that will occur immediately after the tap during the week of the 13th of May. So we're figuring probably on the week of the 20th, we'll see that second tap. So there'll be a lot, this will be one of the changes. Most of the activity has been isolated to the eastern part of the property. Come the week, late May, the week of the 20th, we will see some activity on the main roadway where we'll have fencing, to protect the construction area and separate pedestrians and dogs from that area. And that's when they'll do the tap, and they'll be trenching that will bring the water main, or at least a large 6-inch service from the transmission main up to the house. And then that will be used for a future connection to a service that will come into the Bickford Chesley House. The contractor was also granted a 7-day contract extension to substantial completion. So now the new substantial completion date for this project is June 10th. So we should start seeing all of and that's obviously subject to the delivery schedules of these valves, but we should start seeing the activity on this project, the insertion valves, wrap up somewhere around June 10th. So any questions that anybody has on that?
You mentioned substantial completion around June 10th, but does that mean the whole project will need to be reopened when Portsmouth is ready to do the
Yes, exactly. So substantial completion, essentially the definition of that is the project could be put into productive use. Insertion valves are operable. The project is basically cleaned up, and really what's left is punch list items. The phase 2 project, which would be the crossing, would be a completely separate contract with likely a separate contractor, or I shouldn't say likely a separate contractor, possibly a separate contractor. And we don't have a schedule on that. We don't know what their plan is for bidding that.
So the land would reheal and then would have to be reopened again?
No, we're allowing them to put leave the timber cribbing in place while they determine if that is going to, if a phase 2 is going to be timely. And I believe the agreement allows that to be kept in place for a period of 2 years. So this season, next season, and then we would have a discussion either asking them to remove that, or they may ask us to extend that.
Thank you.
Sure. Todd, I think that's accurate, right, as far as the agreement? Right.
I have a question. Where's the connection to the main line to the house going in? Like, where is its proximity
It's
to like the
it's
community
right off
garden?
the roadway. Let me back up. Great question. Let me see. This is probably the best slide coming up. So you can see here is the crossing of the roadway. Can everybody see my cursor here? This is the crossing of the roadway. So we will likely tap in at this location, follow off the roadway, and then connect coming up here and put a valve in right there. So that's why it will be, there's going to be pedestrians and dogs and others walking through here. So we'll want to have some separation of that with some fencing.
So you still anticipate that being open during this time period? And just
When you say open, what do you mean?
to the public? For
Oh,
visitors?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there may be a slight, detour or separation, from the actual work area where people actually have to shift. But yeah, they'll still have access past it.
Because they'll essentially have to dig a trench.
They have to
from
dig a
that
trench
location
and
to the
bury
house.
a line, a pipe.
Is there any chance they can do the main pipeline when that happens from Newington? From the Newington?
They're doing it from both sides.
Oh, they have to do it from both sides?
Yeah, they have to, just like this project was, they had similar impacts and construction activities on the Newington side for this project as well.
Okay.
But we understand most of the pipe will actually come from the Newington side. They need equipment on the Durham side to do the connection and all. but
Okay.
An excavation to get to where it connects, but the pipe slides in from the other side, I think.
And just, and Rich, correct me if I
Sure.
am wrong, but I believe actually the valves and the connection are not on Wagon Hill.
Right.
They're on the adjacent parcel. So this is about access of trucks and materials, and the construction on the water supply line actually happens off the Wagon Hill property. And just for those of you who've been out to Wagon Hill, kind of visually trying to imagine where that right-of-way is, there are several pipes that come out of the ground along the current water line. So if you are standing like along the access road and there are these vent pipes that stick out of the ground that you see across the field to your left, those are the venting lines for the water line. So it's a good way to kind of envision where that is.
They look like upside down white candy canes, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
any
all,
other
Megan.
comments, questions? All right, move on to your,
Did you want me to just
Yep.
jump right into the
Yeah,
next
just-
project?
yeah,
Okay, sure.
right ahead.
So the other thing that Ann asked me to report on is the status of the Wagon Hill Farm Shoreline project. So as most of you probably are aware of, the town was very successful in receiving about $1.99 million in funding from NIFWF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, for additional coastal restoration beyond the Phase 1 project. So the Phase 1 project is 350, 400 feet. That will take us to the gondola pier, and this will take us about 1,800 feet or up to 1,800 feet beyond the gondola pier, moving in a westerly direction. So we were able to receive that funding, and we're now in the final stages of the administrative requirements that NIFWF and NOAA has for receipt of that funding. All of our documentation has been submitted. We're now just waiting for NIFWF to give us the green light and say you now are able to request reimbursements for this money. And we expect that to happen probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Last time I spoke to our liaison was last week, and he said expect it in a couple weeks. So I'm thinking 2 or 3 weeks we'll have that. We still need to coordinate with them on with any of this federal funding. There's a lead federal agency, so we're working out those details to determine who that will be. Will it be Army Corps? Will it be NIFWF? Or will it be NOAA? Those are probably the 3 likely candidates. We're working through those details. Don't have an answer at this point, but hope to have one soon. And we've also gone through a RFQ process, a request for qualifications process, to qualify certain engineering firms to be to work with us, or select one that would work with us for the construction, administration, inspection, and other aspects of the project. But we're essentially at final design, or pretty darn close to final design on this project. We're now in the permitting phase, which is quite complex, if you I'm sure you can imagine. And we're going through that permitting phase, working with West Environmental, and we've been working with Streamworks and Tom Ballestero, Dave Burdick, and Joel Ballestero. And we hope to be submitting our permits. It's kind of a chicken and egg, because we need to identify who the lead federal agency is first before we could submit all of our permits, because there's federal permits that go along with this. But our local permits, basically our wetland permits, those types are all nearing completion and will be ready for submittal over the next several weeks. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. Yeah, I think, given the timing of the permitting submittals and the approval process, I would expect maybe some preliminary work would be done in 2024, but I think the larger construction and the improvements on the shoreline will probably be a 2025 construction start. We're just, at the point right now in the season that most contractors who would be qualified for this type of work are committed to large jobs, and will probably bid it in 2024 and award the larger project for 2025 construction. Any questions on that?
One quick question, Rich.
Sure, Ted.
Is there a place like on DPW website that one could see kind of the outlines of what this project involves?
We've been doing updates on Friday updates, and I can forward those to you. We've probably got about 3 or 4 of those in there. We don't have a dedicated site on the website. We could do that if that would be helpful, and put some plans and specifications.
I've seen some of
on
the
there.
stuff in the Friday updates, but
Yeah, that was the
looking for
that was the
detail.
extent that we have,
Okay.
but I'd be happy to share, other stuff or post it online. Just a matter of finding the time to pull that all together and
Okay.
set
No.
up a site that would be helpful to users.
Could you maybe just describe generally what the 1,800 linear feet will be like? Just
Sure.
so people have an idea of
Sure.
what the changes will be?
So there's a couple different approaches depending on the degree of erosion that has taken place on the shoreline. And keep in mind, some of that erosion is very severe, where we have a loss of up to a foot of shoreline and tidal marsh annually. Others aren't as bad. But we're looking very similar to what we have in the living shoreline right now, where it's not just a armored slope with riprap. We're trying to do things that are more in context with mimicking nature, and having an approach that would involve core logs and different types of soil pillows with some toe, the reinforcement at the toe of slope. The big issue that we have is the wave action, the storm surges that can damage that. So we need to do something that is going to last. There'll be planting similar to what we have at the existing living shoreline, and we're also looking at formalizing a trail which would have a less of an impact on the tidal marsh, because that is one of the things that we find that the constant trampling of the tidal marsh with either people or dogs will really take a toll on that, and it doesn't take long for that to degrade, and once it's lost, it becomes it erodes even quicker when there's no vegetation there. There's also a lot of shading that's taking place right now with the overhanging trees, and if you take a walk down there, you'll see many of those trees, because of the erosion, the roots are exposed, the soil gets saturated, and they die and they fall, and it becomes a bigger problem. So we're looking to be able to trim back some of those trees, remove all of those dead trees, use those in the construction process for root wads and things like that that will hold that soil together, and that will dry out that area and allow the sun to access it, which will also have a beneficial effect. And then there's other areas that'll be more of a conventional approach, where we're just using the same type of materials that are there now. So as far as like gravels and stone, we'll use that in some areas where that's what the existing or the former type of treatment on that slope was. So it'll be various treatments depending on the type of erosion, and then we'll also have a fence similar to the phase 1 that will provide some separation between the trail and the marsh area, but it'll also provide good visual access to the water, and also some areas where there might be some viewing platforms like the gondola pier, where people can gather and have proximity to the water. Does that describe it enough? Okay.
Okay.
One of the things I was on the Nature Groovy website this weekend, reserving tools for a work day. And I noticed that there's a work day today at Wagon Hill.
No,
What?
I'm not sure where that came from, Sarah.
No, but Rich doesn't know where the 8 to 12 thing came from.
Yeah. Yeah, there was originally a workday schedule that we had thought about putting in place for, to align with a low tide. And that would be the afternoon, early evening, 1 to 5.
Yeah, I know we talked about something last year. It was supposed to be this morning.
Yeah.
It's what's on.
I wasn't
online.
aware of that.
You're not,
No.
good? All right. maybe we
We're all surprised.
Yeah, Ann mentioned that, and in fact, the conditions, I don't know if you've looked at radar at all today.
No.
But we have a significant precipitation event that is just west of us right now.
Yeah.
It'll be here shortly, so make sure your windows are up.
But I should say, this was something we were looking at last year anyways, which I think we were both in the loop that this was something that Tom had recommended, because during one of those winter storm surges, was it a year and a half ago now?
Right.
There was, it was actually quite interesting. You did a lot of cleanup down there.
We did.
Afterward, but you could tell how far the water had come up because of the rack line
Yeah.
along the shoreline. That winter storm essentially eroded quite a bit behind the kind of the retaining wall. I would call it retaining wall. It's a natural retaining wall that was built originally during that phase 1. And so there was a lot of material that was lost behind those stones. So they wanted to come in and refill behind there. And they were kind of toying with, well, do we bring in more core bags or do we put more stone in?
Right.
And then, so I know that was in the discussion a year ago, but
So
didn't realize it was
Ann and I were
today.
talking about this before we
Yeah.
came online, and we were shooting for a afternoon, early evening
Yeah.
workday today with 8 or 10 volunteers
Gotcha.
that Tom and Dave and Joel were able to get commitments from. Unfortunately, the conditions, it's been so wet down there that what we were planning to do was deliver a large 7-8 yards of 1.5 to 3 inch angular stone with a
Yeah.
dump truck, and then some 4 to 6 inch stone that would plug those areas where we had migration of fines coming through that lower sill. And I was very concerned with what that impact would be to the area with large dump trucks and that kind of weight and heavy equipment down there as well. So knowing we were going to have a large precipitation event today, that would have a big
Yeah.
impact, and already having conditions that weren't optimum, I thought it would be best to postpone that until some point in the future when that dries out, and we'll then have to revisit how we do that to ensure that we don't damage any of the existing vegetation. And as Sarah points out, there was a lot of rack, and right now, I think last time we were there, we pulled out three 6-wheel dump trucks of rack material that came up on the living shoreline. And I will give a plug to the Oyster River Middle School students, because when they did their service palooza, is what they call it.
Yeah.
Last year, we were able to get about 80 students down there helping us do basically chip that whole area, do some plantings, picking up debris, and it really came out fantastic. They did a really nice job, and we're lucky because on the 17th of May, so that's next week, we're going to get the Service Palooza kids again. About 80 of them are going to be down there, and they'll help us remove all that rack material. It's not as bad this year. It's probably maybe 1 6-wheel dump truck of material, and we'll have chips delivered, and we'll have them spread the chips. And there's a downed oak tree also that's been there. It's very difficult to remove because it came down on the other side, on the living shoreline of the side of the fence. We'll cut that up into manageable pieces, and the students will carry that out and throw it on the other side of the fence where it'll be removed. So once again, they're really having a substantial impact on the living shoreline by having all those students, volunteer and help us, do the work that needs to be done. And then we'll push off the work that we just described on that lower sill to some point when it's dry.
Yeah. And I guess one of my points of bringing that up is like, even with the phase one, there's the New Hampshire, the way that the tides work and the storms that we have in New Hampshire, they can put some of this work at risk. And so there is a need to regularly manage and maintain these areas on a regular basis. So, and that would be true as well for any of the phase two that goes in, that there going to need to be monitoring and maintenance over time.
Yeah, and that's actually a permit requirement. We have a 5-year monitoring and maintenance requirement that we'll be obligated to perform over that 5-year period and then beyond.
Yeah, and I know my predecessor, Tom, had to replant in that living shoreline probably 2 or 3 years ago, because again, all of the Spartina kind of got washed away, and so they had to do a replanting. And so it's going to, just something to keep in mind, like this is great, but it does require monitoring and managing and maintaining, so over multiple years.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So the next thing that we have to discuss is the Long March property bridges. Last month, we talked about the bridges, and we talked mostly about the Stone Bridge and then on the large Beaver Dam Bridge. I don't think we got at all to the 2 smaller bridges, which are not as difficult to repair, but we ought to at least look at them and so that people see the bridges and see what,
Do you need
understand what maintenance of those bridges is. Because one of the two, there's 2 bridges in the Yellow Trail, which is the trail that goes up towards the dump, I always call it the dump, and then my husband yells at me.
Transfer station.
Transfer station, thank you. And then back down to the old farm, the
Langley Farm. Do you want to do that one or this one? I'm sorry, I had them.
Well, we can start. I didn't have pictures, I don't think, of, did we show pictures of the Bog Bridge last time so people could see exactly what we're talking about in terms of damage?
Which one?
Yes.
So just tell me which one you want to go over first, Ann, and
Let's
I'll
do
get
the
to
one,
the slide.
let's do the Yellow Trail first, because we
Okay.
didn't do that at all.
Yep.
So there's 2 bridges, or really, well, one is a bridge, and the other one is just essentially it goes over a very marshy, wet area. The bridge that goes actually over a small, is it a small stream under there? But just it was raining when I went.
Well, they're both wetlands crossing. This is
Right.
it, but there is like a drainage. So
On-
during the on this crossing
Right.
here, so kind of at the driest point of the season, there's still kind of like a trickle, but it's the backwaters to
Right.
Cromit Creek.
And this is the one that's really in bad shape, this particular one. And you can see the footings have kind of gone off, and the bridge is not straight anymore, and you can't tell so much from this picture, but they're also rotting out. But they're short, and these we can probably replace on a work day. Correct, Sarah? You can do a work day to
and-
replace these.
Yep, and they can, if you replace it in kind, you don't need to get a wetlands permit. It's just a notification. And, and that would be the idea, that a permitting process would not be necessary because we'd replace it in kind.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Sarah, DCAT asked if you could turn the microphone a little more toward you, in front of you. They're having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And this bridge, there's sort of a history with this bridge. It was originally, we thought we had it solved and it was going to be done as a Boy Scout project.
Last year, that's
But
right.
it just ended up being too much of a project for the scout to complete, given his other commitments. So that idea fell through. And so we're still looking at having some kind of a work day to replace it. The other bridge to me looks like it's, the other bridge along this trail looks like it's in relatively good shape.
Yes. Yep.
So that one doesn't need any work at this time. So it's just this bridge and that, and how much would you say, what will be the material cost for this?
So it'd probably be about $1,800 in material costs. That's the estimate I came up with.
Okay.
So, and then, you know, a volunteer work day or two to put it in.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Question, how many years is that work good for, once the work that you're planning on for this is done? How many, a decade? Longer, shorter?
Well, hopefully longer than a decade. And that's a good question. I priced it out using pressure treated lumber. Which should last longer. John naturally really likes the use of granite curbing when he can get it for free from DPW. That's great. Otherwise, you could get it from Land Care. And that way, that can extend the lifetime of the bridge because now you're pulling the most susceptible part out of the water. So it kind of depends on what you end up getting, how much weatherization it gets over time. But, you know, I would hope more than 10 years, 15 maybe.
Okay.
Okay. So then we'll move on to the, well, do you want to do the bog bridge or the stone bridge next?
Well, we did those last time.
Right, but there's updates on
Yeah, well, we can talk about, so I don't know if we talked about the bog bridge that's further along Long Marsh. I can't
Okay.
remember. So, and if you look at the map, sorry, I'm going to probably give, backtrack to the map. So it's this crossing right here along Long Marsh Road.
What number?
Number 3.
Thank you.
Right here. So what we were just looking at is number 4, this crossing here along this loop. So this bog bridge helps with the access from the eastern side of Long Marsh Road. And you'll notice on this map, there's a peace sign and a gate and another peace sign and a gate on the west side. This portion of Long Marsh Road has actually been designated as a Class 6 road, subject to bars and gates, and there's a bunch of, state laws about what you can and cannot do along that as far as improvement. But I, reviewed this with Michael Barrett, and we both feel very comfortable that the updating and improving these crossings is within our jurisdiction to do so along that road without it being an issue. These two, both this long bog bridge and this one were, I think I wrote it in here, they were originally put in 2006, and they were done at the same time, and that was a project that the Nature Conservancy and Ellen Snyder coordinated in town. And a wetlands permit was obtained for both of those at the time that they were installed, which is really great. That's to our benefit that we have that already in place. So, let's see. So it looks like this. Currently 80 feet long. It's essentially 8 of those bog bridges, although some of them have kind of deteriorated and fallen apart, so somebody threw in a ladder.
Which
Right
is
here.
actually not easier to negotiate.
No.
But
And the
out,
stones that are underneath it, there's stones underneath it, which are,
and what's interesting, so what you do, so right here, there is actually the stone wall that kind of marks the edge of the road right-of-way. And right now, so I'm taking this photograph, I'm actually on Nature Conservancy property.
yeah, I'm wondering, do they know that our Yet Green Trail goes through the Nature Conservancy?
Yes, they do, yeah.
They do, okay.
Yeah, I've been out there with Joanne.
So there's another beaver dam along
Yes.
this section of the trail.
Here, let's see, I have a fall
So-
picture. Here's a fall picture. This is from the other side, looking back,
Right,
and the
so,
beaver dam's off to your left.
and so the road is actually to the left of the beaver dam. That's where Long Marsh Road is, it's in the water. So there's a large section of the road which we are not on.
That's right, the stone wall is right here, if you can see it. That's the legal right-of-way, right here.
Yeah. So all along the road, there are 2 stone walls, so it's quite easy to see where our property is. And so I realized as I'm walking on the trail, and when I walked over the stone wall on the right-hand side, that I was no longer on our property. And I
Right,
was a little
it's on the
worried.
Nature Conservancy.
It's on Nature Conservancy. and
Goes off.
It just runs along the wall there, that's out of the water, and then comes back across.
Yeah, but the crossing is along the road.
Right,
along
and
the
then, yeah,
road.
and then it gets back to this crossing, so the actual part of where we're walking on Nature Conservancy is is on the, western side of the bridge?
Nature Conservancy is north, and the Forest Society's ownership is just south.
Yeah. But I mean, the bridge, the Long Marsh Road runs more or less east-west.
Correct, yep.
Yeah, so it's on the western side of the bridge that we are on Nature Conservancy. That's very nice of them to allow us to do that.
Yeah,
Bridge through.
yes, yeah, that's, I hear what you're saying, yep.
And this bridge is in worse shape than the one that goes over the large, this bridge is in worse shape than the one that goes over the larger beaver dam.
Yeah, and actually what's interesting is, I went out there with my kids, I can't remember when, last year at some point, and or this winter, maybe January, February this year, and we did a board count of what the boards that needed to be completely replaced. And the number that need to be completely replaced on this bridge is the same as that long 300-foot bridge. So, number by number, if you just replace it in kind, you actually end up with a similar cost of about $6,000 just to replace those top boards.
And this one, I think it's this one, has one where you step on the board and it goes whoop. Like it's kind of like in the cartoons whenever they
Wait,
play.
I have to tell you a little bit too much information right now. So last night, I'm going to bed at night, and I'm like thinking about this bog bridge, and like literally in my dream, I'm walking across it, and I step on one of those boards where you like knee buckles, and the board flips up behind you, and you catch yourself, and it woke me up right as I was trying to get to sleep. I'm serious. You're laughing, but it's
What
happened to me multiple
It
times.
happened to
I
my
mean,
husband walking across. He was like, whoo.
yeah, yep.
Was that
Anyway.
a dream, Ann, or was that?
No, that was.
No, it's happened to me in
That
real
was
life
real.
too.
And
I mean, it's happened to me in real life too.
And
but-
it was enough of it. I mean, it was like this type of an angle that the board.
Yes, yeah.
So it's a little dangerous in places. Mostly the danger is getting your feet wet.
Is that
Bending
because
up.
the cross member is too far
It's
in?
well, it's not under.
It seems like it's like a seesaw, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so can't you just maybe add another cross member in the middle and
I think it's also that
decrease the
it's sort
span?
of underwater, so
So it's hard to get to.
So it's, well, no, so the board is actually, it goes, it has to go down to hit
It's
the.
floating,
Remember,
huh?
it's floating.
Wow.
So if you step on it at the very end, it just
Sounds like you got to do something to raise that lower cross
Yeah.
member so it's
Yeah.
above water.
yeah.
So again, this falls into the same camp as the longer 300-foot bridge, and that essentially they had a complete replacement in 2014, and then it's been maintained every 3 to 4 years, but because these boards are just in direct contact with water and air at a constant basis, that they just degrade and rot away very quickly. So again, you could replace this in kind. It's simple. A replacement in kind, again, is a notification without a permit. And I don't think I'd have trouble talking with Matt about just dropping a tree to create the bog bridge sills, or they call them sleepers on these bog bridges, and putting in a new structure for $6,000 with a bunch of volunteers. But then again, you're going to be up against that same issue of complete replacement every 8 years and maintenance every 4 years. And so, or every 3 to 4 years. So that's just something to keep in mind. And definitely be more expensive and time consuming to put in a more substantial structure that kind of meets DES's current requests and requirements for a wetlands crossing.
Did you get some estimates on cost of,
A complete replacement, I did not.
no, I mean a replacement and a different.
Of just the boards,
Yeah.
it was $6,000.
Okay, and what about if we did it more like what happens in the bridge that Felt put in?
Mraz?
Yeah, along the Morass Trail, yeah. So just for materials on the 300-foot bridge, my estimate comes out to be $40,000, $45,000 for that. But that, I don't think you need, that was a 6-foot wide, 350, that one's 350 feet. My proposal was 300 foot wide, 300 feet long, excuse me. Structure, I mean, I think you could get away with a 3.5 or 4 foot wide structure. That puts you in a different permitting process. It's shorter, or permitting level, and needs less materials. So, I mean, I could guess based on my other estimate
Right.
that, you're looking at more like 10 or 15 grand. But again, that's just materials.
Right.
If you contracted the work out, then you're looking at something more expensive than that.
So what do people?
So, I just, one of the things I think is interesting that I wanted to bring up about this is just looking at the overall picture. And one of the things and I included some data in here, because we had the trail counters out here for about 9 months to kind of get an idea of where people were coming in numbers, all right? And I have that information in here to share. And, this crossing right here that we were just looking at, its main purpose or
Which
function.
number is that?
Number
I'm sorry,
3.
I can't
Cursor's
see
not
your
showing up.
cursor. Your cursor isn't showing
Oh,
up.
it's
So
not showing up
you keep
on there.
saying here, and I don't know
I'm so sorry,
where here
it's
is.
number 3. My cursor isn't showing up. I
Thank you.
apologize. I assume it is, and it's not. So crossing number 3 is that is what gives people access from the eastern side of Long Marsh, okay? Which is off of Durham Point Road, all right? And the parking there is actually very limited. It's more like pulling off to the side of the road. There might be 1 or 2 spaces. I have seen people I've been out there and have passed people using this stretch of trail.
We had 2
and-
bikers the day I was there.
I know, there were bikers there when I was there as well. And actually, I was out there last summer, and literally I had 2 bicyclists come up to that wetlands crossing that we were just looking at, the bog bridges. They threw their bikes on their shoulders and walked across them, and then got back on them the other side to bike. So I think that one of the values of this crossing is that it does give a good biking commuter transport access. But that access way is not used nearly as much as the parking and the access from the western side of the property, or from the Sweet Trail. So I have some numbers to show you. And you're not going to be able to see this, I guess, because you can't see my cursor. So do you see where there's like a little blue dot just to the right of the orange kiosk symbol? I don't know what that's called, up on the map.
Your eyes are better than ours.
Yeah, well, that I had a counter right around there. Then I had a counter at the end of the long bog bridge, right close to number 2, but on the east side of the bog bridge. And then I had one along the boundary along the Sweet Trail as it enters the Forest Society property along that southern edge, to see what we were getting for access from the Sweet Trail. And now I'll go back to my graphs, which are at the end. I probably should have peppered in my map throughout my presentation rather than having to scroll back and forth. So here's my data from those counters. And a couple things to keep in mind are that the counters that are out there, every person that goes by, or 2 people who might walk by the counter at a single time, they're likely to cross that counter twice, on the way out and on the way back into the parking lot. So these numbers aren't necessarily going to be the total number of users you have every day. In general, you probably would need to divide that number by 2, but some people might click off 3 different counters in a single trip. And because there's different ways that people access the property. If you are coming along the Sweet Trail, you'll probably pass that Sweet Trail counter twice and on the way back out. But there are multiple people who can't get off only once. Anyway, the other thing is that if people are walking in pairs, the counter only counts you as once.
If you walk next.
If you are walking side by side. So the idea with these is that you want to try to put them at a point where there's a pinch point so that people have to walk one at a time. And that just really isn't possible along that main access road. Numbers, they will tweak those numbers and you'll get an underestimate of the number of users. So we're just knowing that it's inaccurate, but a pretty good look at numbers. We're just going to divide by 2. Does anybody have any questions about that? Does that make sense to everybody? And these numbers are tiny. I can't even read them on my own screen, which is why I printed them off myself to have a hard copy. I think I did send these ahead of the last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
They were sent out with the minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, let me look at my, these don't have my total numbers. I know, I have all these numbers written down. So,
Total something up for you? Total something up?
yeah, well, counters was 1,900 approximately. And you divide that by 2 and you get on a monthly average. All right. So that's here. That's you can't see my You can, okay. So it's the graph on the right. It says months of the year, shows you the activity, how much it gets used on a monthly basis. And that first column says average, all right? And so that gives you the average number of counts or clicks. And then the one on the left is the days of the week. And, you know, it's no surprise that Saturday and Sunday have, which are all the way to the right of that graph, have the highest usage. And I did write down, because they didn't have that on the averages on these tables, and I've lost it now, the maximum use, which I thought was interesting, because it was like over 200 people in one single day. And now, let's see, I'm not finding that. I apologize. Ah, do have it. Highest daily use, it was 260 counts. So you divide by 2 and it's about 130. So, and that was the highest use day on a single day. So it's a well-loved trail. I mean, that's a lot of folks going out there. But the question is, where are they coming from? And the pie chart compares those 3 counters. So the green obviously is the west, and the blue is Longmarsh. You can't see my pointer. The blue is Longmarsh East. And then the Sweet Trail is in the black. So you're getting your fewest users coming from that east side. And, you know, the question is, it's not a surprise, because I think the main parking is on the west side. That parking is much more accessible to more users. And if you improved those crossings so that they were more user-friendly, because at this point you may see less people coming in because they don't want to navigate those crossings. But it also, you know, the question is it worth it to improve these crossings to make sure that you have that access from the east side of Longmarsh Road? I'm just throwing that out there. And for me, I think there's a value, because you do see a lot of this biking and kind of commuter traffic that comes through and values those crossings and that access from one side of Dame Road to 108, or Durham Point Road to 108. But just something to think about and talk about. Yes.
You mentioned commuter traffic.
Yeah,
That
commuter.
suggests people who are going to work from home and
Right.
back home.
Yeah.
I don't understand where you would get any real numbers for commuter
Right.
on this pathway. You know, the east side and the west
Right.
side.
Would they be, well, if you have somebody coming from Durham Point Road, they probably would stick to the road versus
Right.
coming across this
Right.
way and then heading north or south
Right.
on 108.
It doesn't seem to be a
Right.
natural connection between home and job.
Right, well, right, and I guess it depends on, and it's probably very few people who use it for commuting for work. I know some people do, but how many people do you know really commute on their bike for work? And,
But
I do-
aside from that, the route is not encouraging to, you know, connect home and work. It doesn't seem to be.
Right, yeah.
It's not a main route into town, for example.
Let's see. What do I have for? That average monthly use for that Longmarsh East was 356 counts. So that puts you at
75?
175, yeah.
180.
Yep. Somewhere between 175 and 180. Yeah.
I mean, I think I mean, it is the smallest area of use, but that's still a significant use of an entrance that has a really really bad bridges.
Yeah.
I mean,
And no parking.
and I mean, I think the extent to which we talk about having connecting, I mean, it does give you a connection through that area that doesn't require you to be on Durham Point Road for a long stretch. I mean, as much as Route 108 is busy, it also has more shoulders than Durham Point Road does. So, I mean, it seems to me it's something that we ought to be keeping open. It does get a little bit rocky, so you have to be a pretty good biker in some of that area to go through it. I mean, this isn't just like your casual biker that's going to bike through there. But again, that would be something that could be worked on if we really wanted it to be, usable. But the first thing you'd have to do is fix the bridges. And it is a lot of work to constantly be repairing these bridges because you have to remember, you have to carry all this stuff in. It's not like, we talk about it being along Marsh Road, but it is no longer really a road. The major road part, of course, is the part that comes in from the west, that long stretch down to the bridge. But but even then, you've got that huge bridge, you've got to carry lumber. So you can't, I don't think we end up bringing it at both ends, don't we?
You would have to bring it in.
You have to bring it in at both ends, and the other route is difficult. Jim Lawson was thinking that maybe he could do it on his small, whatever
gator.
kind of, that he has. But even that, in some of those areas, like where you go through Nature Conservancy property, the trail is like this, and it's often between trees. So it involves a lot of manual labor, people carrying heavy stuff a long distance. So it's not an easy thing to get lots of people to do. It's not a pleasant sort of, pulling up weeds, or it's not.
It's heavy work.
It's heavy work. It's
yeah.
very heavy work. So, it requires a more specific labor force to do it. So it would be nice if we could do something that would leave this property, or leave these bridges a little bit longer before they had to be redone. And that really requires us to get it off the water. Until we can get it off the water, it's always going to be this constant struggle to repair boards. Comments?
Well, what does that entail? Does that entail just using larger sleepers?
No, you'd go from like a sleeper or sill system to driving pylons down, which is
Piles.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, you can drive wooden piles in that, they kind of look like basically like a telephone pole type pile.
Mhm.
You can hire companies or, fencing companies will drive those in for you till a point of resistance, essentially, and they can go down pretty deep. And then DS requires that your crossing is 2 feet above the water line, which for wildlife and water flow reasons. And the benefit of that, though, is that you're also pulling all of your wooden materials out, or most of them, depending on, essentially out of the water and out of contact with water, which increases its longevity.
Yeah, sure.
These boards have been there since 2006, you think? Is that what you said?
No, they
No,
were completely
no, no.
replaced in 2014.
Oh, 14.
Yep, and
Okay,
then
so-
I was looking through the notes, I think it was 3 years ago, and Rachel, you knew, I think you were more familiar with the timing.
Yeah, the Rotary, I know.
Was Rotary did
When
it?
Mike was here, he had coordinated with the Rotary, and they had done, twice now, I know they've done some work out there on those bridges.
I think right in between each of those, so that 2006, it got installed, then the Rotary was out there, then 2014 complete install, and then the Rotary was out there again.
I started in, what, 15?
Okay,
So it was shortly after that, and then I know they were in there for like more of a repair.
oh yeah, and maybe it, I read something in, hold on, I don't have it, I might have it in here.
I think I have a picture, actually, I can try to find, maybe with the date.
Last repair is done in 2021, is what I have written down, that's what I saw in the file. I think Tom worked with the Rotary on that.
Right, so maybe they've been out more times than,
Yeah, more times than we realize.
So, I mean, it seems to me if we believe this is value added and we want to maintain access to the trails, we should put a plan together and a timeline to try to address it. And that probably will tie in with the budget process, so we can budget for it. But this would be the time, I think, to decide on a solution, whatever
Yeah.
it is, and then
Yeah,
plan, and then start budgeting, and then next year we get on it.
so I'll follow up with budget a little bit in project design. So I am meeting with Joanne Glode and Matt, I want to say his name, Scasia. Scasia, thank you. And Rachel from Fish and Game, we're meeting next week to walk the Sweet Trail, because as I've mentioned, Long Marsh Preserve is not the only conservation property out there that the Sweet Trail goes through. And this is an issue that is consistent across the entire Sweet Trail. The plan is actually to put in a grant that all 4 organizations, from all 4 organizations. Joanne Glode thinks she has a match, a private landowner who might match it. So I think some of what we do is probably going to be impacted by the entire project. What other crossings need to be addressed. It's still unclear to me whether or not we could include these 2 crossings along Long Marsh Preserve that are not along the Sweet Trail, but within that Great Bay Protection Partnership area and trail system. So I hopefully will have more information about that. And I think that certainly would affect how we address the stone bridge and crossing that's along the Sweet Trail, that historic structure. Because if this committee says, well, wouldn't it be great to put a bridge in there, and that is going to be, $20,000 worth of materials, or $40,000 to contract somebody to go out there. If we're putting in this grant for multiple crossings and multiple locations across the entire trail, there probably is going to need to be some give and take. And so it's probably going to end up being more of a decision of what we do there based on, I'll have a strong input, obviously, but there's going to be other conservation organizations in the state of New Hampshire kind of weighing in on some of those projects. But it'll also be nice to have, 3 other professionals out there looking at the same projects that I have been. So that'll be nice too.
So the point is that last month, we really were more in favor of moving the access across that water up the stream or down the stream?
Up this.
Upstream.
Upstream.
About 50 feet.
and putting a bridge in there that could more easily go bank to bank, that would be more expensive than simply adding stone to the current stone bridge. So if we do this, if we get this grant, we will most likely have to go with the lower cost option because the money will be spread over a large number of crossings throughout the entire Sweet Trail. Who knows? I mean, maybe we'll get a very large grant. Probably not. And so our decision over, we could still make the decision and go and do it ourselves and then move the portion of the Sweet Trail, but if we want to access the funds in the grant, then likely we'll have to go with a lower cost option on the Stone Bridge.
Yeah,
So-
and I am attending the Trails Bureau workshop today about their recreational trails program grant, which can offer, they do have actually a significant amount of funding that comes in through, it's a federal program that the state administers. And you have to attend the workshop in order to be able to apply for the grant. The funding doesn't become available until next year. So I'm hoping that these projects will be a good fit for that because that does offer a substantial amount of funding. That grant is due June 14th. So, and they want shovel-ready projects. So really we would need to kind of move forward significantly on this in the next month, or, understand that we could possibly apply next year for 2026 funding. It's highly competitive program. I know that CELT is also applying for funding for one of their properties, and they haven't always received funding for their trails programs. So it is, a lot of these trails funds are highly competitive, and it depends year to year what other projects might also be proposed.
So what is this sense of the committee in terms of the bridges along Marsh Road? The two, essentially, Beaver Dam crossings.
Is there like a spreadsheet that kind of has an alternatives analysis on like each one of these bridges? So say, you have all these sites and then you understand here's the cost of each one.
Yeah, this doesn't have the cost in it, but here you go.
And yeah, cost and approach.
Yeah.
And how much, kind of freeboard you're gonna have on each one of those. Because I think, you really want to know what you're getting when you
Right.
pay for it. And then
Right.
understanding the total budget, refining that, I think would be helpful from my standpoint. Just looking at this and saying, okay, here's the total project cost, and we're gonna get this for it. And here's the other, a much more expensive cost, but we're going to get this type of, we're gonna get 25 or 50 years out of it rather than 10 years. And we're gonna be able to keep the bridge completely, not submerged during certain times of the year.
Yeah,
'Cause
and
it's hard for me to see, to
Yeah.
follow it in just like a presentation format.
yeah, and I think part of that too is that
Can I have this?
yeah, please do it. There isn't any there's a time factor in getting professionals out there to say, assess and come up with a plan for that long bridge crossing. And I've reached out to a couple individuals. Again, none of them are available this year, as you know. They wouldn't be available until next year to do any project installation. And then, it's about, all right, when do you get them out there and be able for them to come up with a engineering plan and come up with a specific number is a lot of work on their part. And so I think it's hard to have a very specific number about 4 different projects with 3 or 4 different alternatives.
I guess
Whereas
that's what I'm saying.
I have a general, I know how much materials will cost
Mhm.
and whether a wetlands permit is required or not on each of those. And I think that's a good starting point for each of these projects.
Yeah, I guess that's what my point was. Maybe it would be helpful, and I understand that you want to get your grant submittal in, and, you know, that's really helpful to understand that you have 3 other parties that might participate in that grant. But just the feasibility piece might be helpful to have a separate phase of feasibility and say, here's the things that you just ran through. Here's what we've done. We've hired a, you know, firm that specializes in this type of construction. Here's what they've proposed. Here's what the cost is. Here's what the benefit is. Here's another option, which is not as costly, but this is what we don't get out of that. You know, and that's fine. You know, that's just the way I would look at it, because it gives you the whole picture, as opposed to, you know, I couldn't understand, like, you know, when I think, Daryl, you asked about what would be the approach to keep it above water, and you were talking about going to that other extreme, which would be like helical piers or some driven piles. Is there some other option that maybe you could put some type of a concrete block in place, you know, to place that on some type of a gravel footing? So you excavate, lay that block, and now you have attained that 2-foot separation that you're talking about, but you didn't have to bring in a firm to drive piles. So I think that might be helpful from my perspective to understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, and as in a general rule, I don't think DES is in support of that. I think there's a lot of questions. Well, can you put in a floating dock system? No, actually, the current DES requirements are that you're 2 feet above the ground, right? And so when it comes to trails, there's kind of this understanding about what trails, wetlands crossing, the approach you take with a trails, wetlands crossing.
Well, I was thinking the John Naturally, you know, approach, where he likes to use our granite when we give it to him
Yes,
for no
yeah,
cost.
yeah.
You know, replace the granite with a 2x2x4 concrete block, or double stack the granite and pin it. You know, so there's those types of options that,
Yeah.
you know, might be worth looking at.
I think, well, just another thought I had was sort of, there are solutions that are more long-term and some that are more temporary, but
Yeah.
like, what's the aesthetic we want, the environment? Like, the more long-term it sounds the solution is, the more engineered it becomes, and you might lose some of the natural feel of walking out in the woods over the boards. So I think that's another question. What are we shooting for?
And I'm not sure if you're going to see anything below the deck boards.
Okay.
You know, I think the look, you're right, it might be higher. There might be a, you know, piece of the concrete block that is visible on a profile view, but yeah, it wouldn't be, you could do a full boardwalk here, but I wasn't suggesting that.
So a question that I think follows a little bit along some of the conversation we've had here. Some of the solutions, as Sarah describes, are pretty simple. Replacement in kind, but you're pretty much back down in the water.
Right.
And that becomes a very temporary solution, because you're going to end up having to fix those again at some point. And unless someone is willing to move the beavers or find another solution for the beavers as nuisance critters, which probably is not going to happen, you can pretty well count on that water level not going down and maybe coming up. So getting up out of the water 2 feet or more begins to make sense to me as a longer term solution. So my question comes, are any of these things so bad at this point that they're unusable and that we couldn't take the time to find out what the engineering solutions might be, and then say, oh, well, that's very nice, but we can't afford that, so every 8 or 9 years, we're gonna go out and put boards in the water again. That strikes me as a reasonable way to approach this, to get the costing of the alternatives. And it doesn't solve the problem this year or next year, but it's been a problem now for 3 or 4 or 5 years. You know, one more year of Ann risking her neck on a bridge, and I hope you do it safely. It's just that, you know, that's the question I come up with, is it so pressing that we have to get this fixed now? Or do we pause and take that longer look to see exactly what it is that we want?
I think the second bridge, you would need at least to replace a few, you would have to replace a few boards. I mean, the bridge that you hit first, if you come from Long Marsh East,
Is it dangerous? That's the question. If it's dangerous, I think then we should act.
I would say so.
Is
I
it?
think
Okay.
the 2 crossings along Long Marsh are a safety issue.
Yeah.
And,
That's what you do.
but that's not to say that we couldn't spend the 6 grand to replace boards and replace some of those sleepers, right, or sills, and just say, okay, we know that this is going to work for us for the next 3 years. It'll make it safe, and in the next year or 2, we'll come up with a permanent solution.
Right. And I think
Right.
that's kind of what I was suggesting as a priority. If there's something that really, really, really needs to get fixed, we probably ought to do that, even if it's a temporary fix. But then still go through the process of seeing what that longer term plan might look like.
Yeah.
okay. Makes sense to me.
Yeah,
And I
I'll
think
add.
that was kind of where I was heading, and we'll see what the crew says when we're out next week, looking at the Sweet Trail, but I feel that way about the bridge along the Sweet Trail, at that stone bridge, like putting in another, a wooden walking bridge 50 feet up from where the stone bridge is right now is a really lovely idea, but it's very expensive, and it will take time, engineering plans, and time to determine how much that will cost and whether it's worth it, and that we do need a solution, and that really the easiest solution is either to quickly throw in a crossing, like a wetlands crossing system, or to fill in the stone ford on either side of the stone bridge. And both of those would be inexpensive and easy and fast to do, and then we can figure out whether or not it makes sense to put in that bridge afterward. But I will definitely have more information after my meeting next Tuesday.
I was going to echo Ted's comments that I think it's probably would be prudent to do a repair on what's there to make it safe. And it would be nice to do a plan for a long-term, better solution, a more durable solution for the long haul. But those crossings are pretty hazardous right now, and I don't know whether there's any liability, for the town or whatever, for people that are, walking around out there. Someone could really get hurt. So, I don't know if it should be signed, dangerous crossing or not. No idea.
I'm in agreement with the views just expressed.
All right. Seems like we have a consensus then.
Are folks interested in trying to see something more substantial go in along that 300-foot crossing that looks something more like this, which is at the Biscassic Greenway?
All right. that is substantial.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have to be, that's 6 feet wide, it wouldn't have to be 6 feet wide, 4 feet wide.
No, this
would
this
be-
is, yeah, this
would
is
be
6
great,
feet.
yeah.
Yep, with a 12-foot bump out
Yeah.
for wildlife
beautiful.
watching. Oh,
Very
and
nice.
So-
people love
Yeah.
it. They absolutely love it.
And that, you know, if you build it, they will come,
Yes.
right?
That's right,
And,
exactly.
The parking would.
And then-
And now you've got a parking problem.
Right.
Right, we already have a parking problem, well, sort of. I've had trouble parking there.
Yeah,
So,
I was just out here and showed 5 people who had never been there.
Yeah.
Took them out there, they all thought it was terrific. There was also a guy fishing there.
it's a very well-loved location.
I don't know what I was
Ah.
expecting to catch, but
And I've seen a similar thing in suburban Minneapolis through the lakes and yeah,
Yeah,
it attracts a lot of people,
it does, yeah.
but it gives you a wonderful advantage. In their case, they have a pond on each side. It just happens to be a kind of a marshy spot through the middle that they built the trip, something like that, with the bump out. And it's used every day of the year
Yep,
by lots of people.
Gunstock has something similar as well.
do they?
Yeah, near their camping, they have a walk like that winds through wetlands. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. And actually, Marty also had another suggestion for this. So if we're kind of postponing the long-term solution for this crossing, we can maybe bring that up. But he was out on a town property, and I mean, he can tell you more, but it had like a stainless steel decking system that you use on docks, and the Town Conservation Commission put it in along a wetland. And so it was really, it looks like, you know, your metal chain link fence posts kind of coming out of the ground with this metal decking system that was 3 or 4 feet wide, that crossed the wetland. And so, and have not seen a dock system used for a wetlands crossing before, but obviously that probably will have greater longevity than any sort of wood crossing that you might put in. It was $120 per linear foot just for the decking system itself.
Installed.
So that comes out to about 36 grand. The information I saw on the website, that didn't include any of the footings or foundation that would need to be in place. And so that, you know, is an alternative that is a possibility. That's a long-term solution.
The downside of the decking is it's metal decking's noisy.
It is very noisy, yeah.
I think that decking was actually like a fiberglass material, but it looked like different deckings were available. It could be wood, it could be that fiberglass, or it looked like some of that plastic type of material that's made from recycled milk
They did have
bottles.
that too, yeah. I
So-
think the one you sent was,
It looks like a boat dock,
yes.
and so it's actually aluminum.
Oh, sorry,
And-
aluminum, not stainless steel.
Right, and the supports are oversized bearing plates that the aluminum poles go into. So it's ground supported. There's
just like
no,
my
Versus,
dock.
versus
Yeah.
piers.
yes,
Yeah.
so there's no piles, there's no driving piles. And
Feet.
you just push those feet down to a point of resistance. And in these situations, it was a road at one point. So if there may be, you may not be going down into muck. You might be going into some really soft material, but if before it was flooded, it was a road, there may be something you could actually bear on. But,
Yeah, and I think that is the challenge. In that circumstance, you look like you're crossing like a wetland that didn't necessarily have standing water. And this is probably a slightly different scenario. So I'm
Could
not
be.
sure how, that would work, say, on the yellow trail. Having those footings that you bared that bear down on the ground. But it might not in this 300-foot crossing. You also not sure if you put in that substantial a crossing, you might want something, does it have a pile that gets driven down into the ground? Because they have
No.
those.
No, this is not.
It's just a metal footing without any sort of
And-
pile that goes down into the ground to stabilize it,
Right, an oversized bearing plate.
right? But some of those
With a-
sometimes have, you can have a bearing plate with a helical pile that gets driven down, like a 1-inch helical pile, like a small one that gets driven down 4 feet, to stabilize it, because that's where you end up with those sorts of issues.
Okay, well, this is interesting. It sounds like we, that we need then to kind of work on the 6,000, because we don't have a budget for 6,000 for the current bridge. I mean, we don't have it we don't have 6,000 in our budget right now to fix that bridge.
To fix those bridges
but the-
temporarily.
The Conservation Commission does have a fund for trails. And so it could be a request that's made for funding at the Conservation Commission
Okay.
to pay for this project to happen this summer.
So in that case, we probably ought to, does the committee want to go ahead and see if we can get the money from the Conservation Commission? Because if we do, then we should do it now and see if we could present the request to them at their next meeting, which would be at the end of the month.
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay.
If that's dangerous out there or, not usable, we should repair it
Okay.
like Ted said.
So we should probably take a vote then? Or I need some kind of a motion?
You want a motion that basically asks the Conservation Commission to attend our next meeting?
No.
No.
we're gonna- I would
Ask
go
the
to,
Conservation Commission if they would approve, well, first we should have a motion that we think that the bridges along the Long Marsh Road Trail need to be replaced.
Or
In
repaired.
kind, repaired
Repaired.
in kind, yeah, in kind, is that what?
yeah.
And that we request that the Conservation Commission put forth the $6,000 needed for materials.
Well, right, so that would be for each of them. It would be probably $6,000 for each crossing to replace those boards.
Okay.
You're looking at hemlock. It's 3-inch by 12, 3 by 12 hemlock boards that sit on top of those bog bridges. So it was priced out based on replacement of that.
Do they have 12 grand?
Yes. I don't bring the budget money with me, but I believe they do. Sure, I have budgets.
Is pressure treated much more money than hemlock? Do you know, Sarah?
I don't know the difference. I can look it up. The question is, do you want pressure treated wood sitting in water? And I'm not. And, I know that it's used for crossings, but I don't believe it's something you want sitting in water.
Why would that be?
Chemical leaching?
Well, the chemical's going to leach out whether it sits in water or not over time. So if it's going to cause ecological damage, then we shouldn't use it. But if it's not, I don't see the issue.
Yeah, well, that's the issue is that the chemicals used in pressure treated wood do damage the environment of the water.
No, I mean,
They are.
there's been, I'll look into it some more. I know that they've changed the chemical composition of that treatment of pressure-treated
Yes,
wood,
they don't use cyanide anymore.
right?
Yeah, no more
You
arsenic.
know, back when I started, like whatever, how many years ago, like people were using pressure treated and there are all these rules and regulations, like you can't cut that wood by the water, like you have to, any cutting has to happen in your yard, you can bring the pressure treated wood over, but like you couldn't even use it as decking on top of a system. So I will look into that, and maybe Ted knows more about it.
Only that the system has changed, and I only really followed it a little bit was, railroad ties always used to be pressure treated. I get used to hear about that.
Crease.
So what we basically need is, and I'll make the motion that we recommend that the 2 trails be repaired and that we request funding from the Conservation Commission to do so.
The 2 bridges.
Yeah.
The two-
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
the crossings.
Bridges
Two
along
crossings.
The
Marsh.
2
Two
crossings be
crossings, yes.
repaired, and that we request funding to do so from the Conservation Commission so that the work can proceed this year.
Can we just add the amount in that motion? And
Do we
I
have,
think we just ask them for what they are,
Yeah.
what they've got.
Yeah.
You know,
no money, don't ask him how much.
don't ask how much.
Well, we don't know, we don't really know.
We have an estimate
But-
at this point, but if we said 12,
then we
and
do,
6 per, and we found out, well, for 13, we could get stuff that could last 20 years out there instead of 10, then let's, Sarah's gonna find out a little bit more about the pressure treated, whether that makes sense or not. So I would leave it as an open-ended request, that we just request the funding from the Conservation Commission to repair the 2 crossings at Long Marsh.
And
Yeah, but I
probably
think the
by
yellow
time
trail
Sarah-
also needs to be, they addressed, and they had, and that would be another, $2,000. So, and my intention was to, replace that this summer as well, so,
All right, so let's include that.
yeah.
I mean, while we're going to the bank,
That's, and
Let's
that
make-
one, right,
make the one withdrawal.
one withdrawal, don't have to fill out so many slips.
Also, Sarah's time between now and then to have a more, because they probably will ask you.
oh, I'll have to have
Yeah.
a specific number,
Yeah,
for
by
sure.
then.
Yep,
But should we add something about it being a life safety concern?
no, I wouldn't,
You wouldn't?
don't put that on record.
If you,
It is what
Okay,
it
it's
is.
on the record. Scratched.
No, I think it's fair to say we have a generalized health and safety concern out there
Yeah.
with these rotting boards in wet, slippery, rocky areas, and that's one reason why we're moving to take action to address it.
And I think that's an argument we make to the Conservation Commission. I don't think it needs to be part of the motion.
No, right, that's right.
So we're including then the Yellow Trail Bridge, we recommend that the 2 crossings be repaired as well as one of the Yellow Trail crossings, and request that the conservation fund the materials.
Yeah,
That sounds right. Whatever Ann said is what I move.
It's mostly yours, I just added that as well as the one in the Yellow Trail crossing.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? Okay, unanimous?
I just don't want to, I also don't want to lose track of the fact that this will obviously need to be, a permanent decision should, I think,
Yes,
should be made, and that this is a temporary solution,
Right.
right?
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is based on the idea that something really should be done because there is some hazard out there.
Yeah.
And this is a temporary fix, but the longer-term perspective, as we've talked about here, is something we should put together.
Sarah,
Yes.
do these bridges or causeways have a designation? Is there a number, like causeway number 2? We were talking on your slideshow,
Oh,
for
yeah.
example, you had number 3.
There were numbers,
I
yeah.
Are
have
those-
not,
Are those going to be, could those be adopted, so these bridges or
Have
have an
numbers.
actual number, so
That would be great.
when,
We can refer to number 3, bridge.
rather than the
2, 3, 4,
causeway
5.
towards the east end of the, huh?
Or we could
Sure.
name them, you know, the first one could be named, I don't know, Marty. or-
Yeah, and, yeah.
Yeah, I think
The
as long
Ford-
as we have a map with
Ford.
them on, we may as well go with the numbers on the map, I think. So,
let me see, I have this PowerPoint open twice, which is silly.
Hi, Brian.
Whoops,
As a, get that,
I
put that
just closed
tree, put
PowerPoint
that tree in
altogether.
there.
okay, I have the,
do you have the map? We can just
I have
use
the
the
map
map.
with me. Yep, here we go, Marty.
Stonebridge is
We've
number
got that.
1.
Do you have the
Bog
map?
Bridge
Yeah.
is number 2. Everybody have the
Okay,
map?
so,
I sent a memo, so.
so it's 2 for the Bog Bridge, right? 3 for the next one?
Yeah.
Because there's no numbers on my map, so.
I had
And then-
Stonebridge as number 1.
Stonebridge is number 1. And that isn't actually
Oh,
on the
I have the
map.
map. I have the map on my PowerPoint. Why is that not showing up there? Hold on, let me do, I think I know why. Oops. There we go.
So are they 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah,
The
number 1
4
is
and
the
5.
Stone Bridge.
Yeah.
Yep, and then 2 is the 300-foot bog bridge that crosses Cromit Creek.
And
And
then
then,
3
4,
is the 80-foot one.
yep, along Long Marsh. And then 4 and 5 are the wetlands crossings along the Yellow Trail.
but the 4 is the one that needs repair.
Replacing, yeah.
Replacing.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's 2, 3, and 4 are what we're asking
Right.
for funding for.
Okay, let me go back. What's next on the agenda? Is it me?
Yes, it is you.
Okay, so quick update. I did go out with Jeremy Howland on one of his 2 days out sampling lichen at Long Marsh Preserve. He wanted to head out to this general area to sample. You can't see my pointer, the northern end of the property. So we took the yellow trail and then bushwhacked north along wetland edge and the piece that is Horsehide Creek piece, because this actually property is made up of 3 different transactions, plus kind of the woodlands of the transfer station. This southern end of the transfer station is kind of connects to this. It was interesting. So it was fun. What was nice connecting with him in that I think he is open and willing to kind of do a presentation to everybody when he has more information collected, to the Land Stewardship Committee about his research and what he's finding. He was very enthusiastic about lichens, and he was. And
Did he tell you you can eat them?
no.
No, okay. They
No.
don't usually tell you that.
We basically collected little samples using chisels off of trees and rock, but not too many off of rock. And he had a transect that he drew, so we picked a point and then picked a random direction and did a transect down and collected off of the bark itself, off of the base of the tree, and then what he considered through fall, which was essentially branches on the ground. He would look for different types of lichen on the branches on the ground, and then on rock. And we didn't, essentially, if we hit one species of tree, say a red oak, we didn't really hit another red oak. He really tried to pick like 1 or 2 tree species, and that you only were trying to really sample one of each species. And the time that we spent out there, he collected 60 samples and I collected 30. So a little bit different in our efficiency, but it really is very minimal, the impact that it'll have. Although, lichen reproduction can be, and dispersal is more challenging than, say, for other species. But it has very limited impact. Sophia, does anybody have any questions about that? He did 2 sites. One of them was the one that we worked on together, and then he was going to go back independently the next day to hit kind of south of Long Marsh Road, kind of between the Blue Trail and Long Marsh Road, essentially.
Do you know what the object of his research is?
Yeah, so what he indicated is that there isn't a lot of understanding or knowledge of the types of species of lichen in the seacoast area. It's very limited. There's been quite a bit of work done, say, up in the Whites. And so he, I think, in general, is just trying to look at what kind of species we have. He also is noting information down such as, are there invasive species? I think he's looking at, is there a difference when you have a more disturbed system versus a more natural system? So I think that's part of what he's looking at. He's a first-year PhD candidate. So this is, the start of his process in his research.
Thanks.
It's good to know that lichens are an indicator species that reflect air quality and that reflect changing conditions in the environment in ways that other plants don't necessarily or so obviously show.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a real value there.
Yep. Let's see. I have trail counters out at Jackson's Landing right now, and I know Ann said she was out there doing a volunteer trail walk and didn't see them, but if you are out there or if you hear anybody asking questions about why there is this funny metal box, my name and email is on there, so hopefully I receive any questions that might come up regarding the infrared trail counters. So I put those up last month. I had 3 work days, and I wanted to share photos of those. Let's see, I had them up. So I had an afternoon with let's see if they, I'm gonna close this off. Can you, is it possible, do I have to share my screen? Hold on a second. Craig, how do I share my screen so they can see photos?
Sharing is wide open.
Sharing is wide open?
You should be able to share your photos.
So if they're up on my screen, you should be able to see them up on your screen?
Are they open on your screen?
Yeah. All right. Let me try this again. Nope, it's not working. Let's see. All right, well, I shared them in my monthly report, at least some of them, which Ann and Todd have seen. I apologize. I wanted to share photos because I had 3 work days. One was with the Air Force ROTC at Long Marsh Preserve, and we did a trail reroute of the Yellow Trail as it enters and exits, either in either direction, into the power line right of way. And I think, Ann, did you get out there?
I did get out there. It looks good. I still had a little trouble finding after you get that big open area, you need a post or something that makes people look to the left.
Yes, we tried putting up new signs. We brushed out through the power line right of way, although I think there still needs more brushing out to do, but we ran out of time. And in one, so that was a great day, and I had one of my trail stewards, volunteer trail stewards, Peter, join me, and he and another ROTC cadet went and they actually walked portions of the Blue Trail and removed some of the smaller or larger branches or smaller logs that had come down in some of a recent storm, using a bow saw and two people to kind of move the heavier wood. And so we got some general cleanup done, but we also did a nice reroute and cleanup of the yellow trail, which was great. I also was at the Pike property with ATO Brothers, and our goal there was to remove both electric fencing as well as wooden fencing along that was used to pasture horses previously. And our primary access to the Pike property is off of Packers Falls Road, and it's a 50-foot strip right-of-way, and about 100 feet down that right-of-way you hit this fence line. And so in order for us to sort of have our main access into that property for maintaining the fields, we needed to have that fence line removed. There's also additional fencing, so that will help with the management of the property by removing it, because it's in kind of in the middle. You know, we don't really want it there. It kind of hinders some other access, and as well as, say, the fluidity of the wildlife to move. And so I'll have to get back another time to complete that work. But I'm grateful that we have that main access way available now for us to get in and out for management. And then, that's my Lincoln. And then I had a leadership class come out to the Mill Nature Sanctuary, and it was a drizzly afternoon, and they were such positive, energetic group. They were really a joy to work with. And they managed some invasives. They lopped off some multiflora rose. They pulled garlic mustard. They mulched trails. So they had huge groups, some people pushing a wheelbarrow, some people digging mulch, some people spreading it. I had some kids sand off some graffiti that was on the bench. We put in a bluebird box in the field, and then we just did some general cleanup and had people walking around picking up trash. So we got a lot done in that afternoon out at the Mill Nature Sanctuary. And so those were kind of my three big field days, I would say, last month.
Do you want to just go over the survey?
I can, and then I also promised Aaron Hardy-Hale I would also bring up the fact that the Conservation Commission endorsed an outreach and education subcommittee, and they, Aaron is planning on, who is a member, she's the vice chair of the Conservation Commission, is planning on chairing this subcommittee or working group, and is looking for a representative from our committee who'd be willing to participate. And the idea is, I will get my information out, that essentially you'd be providing activities, workshops, field trips that are educational and kind of are teaching people about how to steward our conservation areas, your backyard, and connect and engage people, community members, to our conservation lands. So just something to think about if there's anybody here who might be interested in attending or in participating in that. Aaron estimates probably about a commitment of maybe 5 hours a month for that, including, say, attending a meeting, but also the idea is that these individuals would be spending time creating and putting on those events or activities. And I think the first thing I asked them to work on is the upcoming Durham Day table. So I don't and I'm sure Rachel will bring that up during the meeting. And then you wanted to touch base on survey. The
Yeah,
survey came in,
The survey came in higher than we anticipated, partly because we asked for more, we asked for a complete survey, we decided on a complete survey, and we'd gotten an estimate on one that wasn't quite complete. So right now, we have one estimate with a group that we do a lot of work with. But we've decided it'd probably be a good idea just to get a couple other estimates, and we have a couple names of people that, with recommendations, so we're gonna send out, I forget what it's called.
yeah, and we didn't grab Rich when he was here because I had sent him the RFP to share. I just had the opportunity to touch base with him briefly a couple weeks ago, and he said he had not done that with the couple groups that he had thought he would be able to. So I have some additional, people that I've worked with or had recommendations for that I'll just send out directly to.
So that's where we are on the survey.
Could I back up a minute?
Yeah.
What is this other committee that the Conservation Commission is setting up? As a subcommittee or a focus
Well,
group, or is it a
It-
working group?
It's
or
a subcommittee.
It's a subcommittee?
So,
It's-
Todd and I had this discussion at our last meeting. I think the way they're envisioning it, it really should be a subcommittee. I think Eric, but because right now it's rather informal that we're trying to garner more members as well as find a better focus, that they kind of want to hold it as a quote-unquote working group until they have something more formal. But the Conservation Commission did vote to endorse the group and to basically come back with a more formal or finalized proposal.
So is it a working group or a subcommittee?
Right now, it's sort of they're calling themselves a working group, right?
They are calling themselves a working
So
group.
that's the title.
And their mission is, what is the,
I'll send you the information.
okay,
Education.
Yep,
okay.
that's right. And I
That's
brought
good,
that
okay.
with me. We came up with this title called Stewardship, Education, and Engagement Working Group.
There you go.
And the Conservation Commission didn't really like it.
Oh, sorry.
So they said, you also have to come up with a new name. That's sort of one of our first tasks. We call it the C, S-E-E, C Working Group.
This-
So if there's anybody with any other sort of creative ideas about how to rename it, I'm open to it.
The CCSEEWG. Okay, thank you.
Okay, committee reports? Anything to share?
Nothing from the trustees.
Okay,
Nothing new, anyway.
yeah. Rachel?
Durham Day, as Sarah mentioned, is June 22nd. So we've sent out information to all the committees and commissions, the chairs of those, to get everyone to participate if they're interested. So that's going to be downtown, 12:30 to 3 on June 22nd. We'd love for everyone to be part of it if they're able to. I've had some conversations with Aaron, because we're, through Parks and Rec Committee, we kind of have a little trails working group as well. And we've been talking about bringing back Discover Durham's trails. And
that'd be great.
So I've had some initial conversations with Aaron and Roanne, and specifically Aaron. So we're looking to meet here. I think she's free like after May 17th to get together to try to get the ball rolling with that. We'll probably learn a little bit more about their initiative as well. So those are the big updates for Parks and Rec.
Great.
This committee deals almost exclusively, as we know, with public land, whereas the Agricultural Commission, which I report for, deals almost exclusively with private land. But I think there ought to be an overlap in the sense that we supposedly should be advocates for good stewardship on private land as well as public land, and making suggestions that would assist people in their management of their own property. And in that light, no mow May is beginning to take hold in Durham. More people are aware of it, more people are talking about it, and more people are practicing it. It's got a ways to go, but the idea of no mow May. And then secondly, leaving leaves on the ground in the fall and over the winter is beginning to catch on as well. Obviously not with everybody, but more and more people are realizing that there is something important associated with these kinds of land practices that are atypical of the way we've participated or managed private lands in the homesite properties, particularly in the past. So those people, those two activities are coming up more and more, but we could be doing more advocating on at least these two subjects. That's it.
Daryl, anything?
No, I have nothing.
Okay. So apparently we've had a little bit of an issue again with parking at Wagon Hill has come up. And I was wondering, have we ever done a car survey? I mean, with the, the same as we do with the people surveys in terms with the counters? Traffic counter?
Not in recent times, maybe 15 years ago.
But we do
might
have traffic counters, right?
We do have traffic counters. It's something we could do, yes.
So, because we do tend to say that, well, there's really only certain times that there's an issue, but we don't actually have something to back up our words with, and it would be good if we could back up our, come at some other, pick another time to go to Wagon Hill as opposed to, and base it on actual numbers. Would be good. So if we could is there a way we could get that done?
Well, we did have a site walk there this past week at the property. The concern was that periodically there is parking going on in the no parking areas. And it tends to be short-lived. The police work in directed patrols as they have time to do so, but we don't have the resources budgeted to post an officer or two at the property regularly.
Right.
And so the feeling of the group was that the prime times are really Saturdays and Sundays from 8 to 10. It's sort of when the dog walkers are there. And it tends to align with beautiful days. Or in the wintertime, a recent snowfall with a lovely Saturday or Sunday, and everybody comes. And it's hard to plan around that because we're not sure when the conditions are going to be right.
Right.
So the police department is planning to make an additional concerted effort to have Wagon Hill on the list for the officers to drive through Saturdays and Sundays from 8 to 10. Won't be there all the time. We can't, but they're going to make an effort to do that. Nobody at this point is talking about expanding the parking there, but that came up from as a point of conversation, and the feeling was that the property is really at capacity now in terms of usage, and expanding parking is just going to put more pressure on it.
Right.
There was a suggestion by one of the attendees to see whether we could take the area that Portsmouth is using as a staging area for their water main project, at the other end of the property off of Route 4. But our feeling was that that was not a good plan because, number one, it would dramatically impact the aesthetics of the property.
Mm-hmm.
It adds to the demand because you could park more people. But also, there's a safety concern. We have only a temporary permit for Portsmouth from the state for the duration of the project, and the visibility is poor coming in and out there.
Yeah.
So we just were concerned about that.
It's already
Yeah.
bad enough just coming out of
Right.
the main entrance, but at least people know that entrance
Yeah.
is there.
Right.
So,
Yeah, the east side distance from there is not good. in that other area.
Yeah.
We did talk about trying to improve some of the signage as well, to make it clear there's parking at the top
further-
of the hill, further
More
up.
parking at
Yeah.
the top
That's right.
type of sign.
A concern came up as well about, when the Chesley Bickford House is renovated and open, will that add to demand? And if and when we improve the barn to make it, 3-season or year-round usage, how will that impact things? And our response was we will have to be very thoughtful about coordinating events at non-peak times.
Right.
Or if there is a peak time event, we need to do it at a time when we can open the orchard and, direct people down there with parkers.
But
et
again,
cetera.
a nice thing to have with all of that might be an actual traffic count of cars going in
Yes.
and out.
So the group that walked it felt that they knew when the demand was. They felt it was 8 to 10 Saturdays and Sundays on nice days. So there was no interest.
But that doesn't
that
account, but that doesn't give you any help on coordinating any kind of an activity that takes place because you already are unlikely
that's a
to
good
do
point.
it then.
Mhm.
So what are your low and high points? There are other, as I remember the people count, there was also high times at the end of the day because people get out of work and go through. I think if it all,
It might be useful, yeah.
something to work into a budget would be,
Yeah,
or into
so-
the time, I know it, they may be in use doing other things,
Yeah,
but to work in the traffic count for Wagon Hill and, kind of a longer term traffic count, so you get different seasons and different time, and it really, what would be really
Yeah,
nice would
like
be
a
to do
year,
an
a full
entire
year.
year
Yeah.
traffic count at Wagon Hill. And then you'd have some really good numbers to go forward when you have to deal with other issues. And in particular, I would think for rec, if you do want to do anything out there, to have some knowledge of what is going on.
I wonder if the community garden, they have members that are there sort of at all times, and I'm sure they also try to avoid using Wagon Hill when it's its busiest. So I bet they might have some good insight.
Yeah.
Um,
But it would still be anecdotal.
It'd still be
though. It wouldn't-
It still would
Anecdotal,
be
though. I think what you
anecdotal, that
need
is
is-
correct.
It wouldn't be
Years
data.
of
A year of data.
And a year of data on Wagon Hill.
Yeah,
And it's fairly easy because there's only one way
Right.
in and out.
right. So let me reach out to the Stratford Regional Planning Commission, because
okay.
they do traffic counts. We have to request an area.
Right.
And so let me see what they can do. We have only one, and it's, we are using it for like speed counts on
Right.
roadways when there are
Right.
complaints.
No, I can understand
And
you if it's just one.
So,
But
let me
yeah,
ask.
but I still think we need it.
Good.
It would also be useful for general people that use it, they can look and say, oh, this is the time to go, because that's
Yeah.
when there's
Right.
nobody there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, John.
Does Councilor Burton have any particular input into this, given his deep familiarity and constant attendance at Wagon Hill?
Well, he has consistently raised this concern about people not adhering to the no parking signs. And it frustrates him that he sees it and there's not, immediate enforcement. But we
And
just
also-
don't have the people to leave there. That's
Right.
the challenge.
Yeah.
So I think his solution would be ideally, we identify those peak times and we have somebody stationed at the bottom of the hill, somebody stationed at the top, and we coordinate letting people in and out in a really organized way. And during peak sledding times when we've done directed patrols, that's what we've done. And it works very effectively, but that requires 2 officers on special
Right.
detail.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
So, a couple of things occurred to me. One, if somebody parks in a no parking area and the officer arrives, are they ticketed?
They might be. The officers try to find the person and give them a warning first. And get my understanding is they get good compliance and it's a very nice interaction. If somebody were a repeat offender, they would ticket them.
Okay, all right. So I was just wondering, you know, what the signage is up there that says, you know, you're gonna get ticketed. The officer has the discretion
Yes.
to go either way, but if there's a sign that says, you know, there'll be a fine, that might help. And then in terms of survey, is there a general prohibition about using a video camera to record the traffic rather than counter?
Well, we do have, there was a burglary up there not long ago, and so we actually do have a video monitoring the parking area right now, but that's not tracking cars in and out, you know, it's
Right.
simply watching the area. So I don't know if that's helpful.
I was just, you know, I'm working with another landowner in another place, a large block of ground, and they have video monitors
Yeah.
to keep track of the folks wandering in and out.
See, like, we talked about that, could we have a video monitor, and then if it gets really busy, we could send an officer out. The challenge is we have nobody to monitor the video
Right.
to see if it's getting
Well,
busy.
they don't monitor, I'm thinking it's just a recording,
Oh,
and then it's easy to count cars, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, but somebody still
But
has
if
to
somebody
do
has
that.
to do that.
And that
It's
takes
very,
time.
yeah, it's very personal. I had the same discussion with Steve about it, because he uses video cameras to track use, and instead of the infrared trail counters like we use. And he said it gives you a lot more information, because it tells you what type of user it is. Is it somebody on a mountain bike? Is it somebody with a dog? Is it somebody
Right.
running? Like, is it ROTC? But that means he has an employee who sits there and watches all that video, right? Or fast forwards through it and keeps track of it and has to record it. So it's very time intensive.
All right, well, that's some suggestions. Any other comments?
So, a girlfriend of mine asked, she's like, what were all those people doing out at Wagon Hill earlier? And I told her, oh, there was, parking. And so she was there with her dog. And she said, her recommendation was that there just be 2 really big clear signs. One that says, your dog has to be on leash after 10 a.m. Not quite that verbose, but dogs on leash after 10 a.m. Big, clear sign that's all that it says. Because she feels like that the signs that are there now have the entire dog ordinance on there, and that unless you stop and you read through it, which most people don't, it's not, there should be something there more obvious. And she's there regularly with her dog. And then the other is to have a sign that says, if the parking lot is full, the park is closed. Which is simple, but the idea that if there's no parking, there is no more room for you. Go, please enjoy our other conservation lands. Find another place to go. Which is
Go fill
funny.
up Long Marsh Road, right?
Right, that's right. Or Oyster River. I mean, I've had to do that. I've gone to, it's a mile from my house, but I've gone to Oyster River and the parking's been full, and it doesn't happen. It's only happened twice, maybe, and I go somewhere else. I've gone to East Foss Farm instead for my walk because there
Or even
wasn't any
west.
parking. Right, that idea,
Yeah,
So-
but I like the idea of that, on leash after 10. Currently, the way in which it's stated, and I guess people don't also read the separate sign that says that the park is closed at dusk. It's dawn to dusk. So I had someone had their dog off leash in around 5 or so, and claimed that it was dusk, so that now we could have the dog off leash, because we had to have them leashed between 10 and dusk. But park is closed at dusk, so we shouldn't even be there, but apparently that
right.
was a different sign. So having a sign simply say dogs must be leashed after 10 a.m., that would be a good thing, because that's it, you know?